I still meet people that go to my events and are like, this is the first, they'll say that this is the first event that they've gone to in 2, 3 years. So that means like throughout COVID and even post COVID for a year or two, they didn't leave their houses and at least for the purpose of networking.
Right.
And so actually what you see is a lot of people are quite new and a little bit awkward and still just getting back into the process of things. And surprisingly, a lot of these are executives at companies too, like VP level folks at Google and Facebook, who are like, I don't know how to do this networking thing, which is quite surprising to me.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to chat with Andrew Yeung, who is just in the middle of a transition of his own, but wears many hats, not just the hat you see him wearing now. So I'd love to hear, given how many hats you wear and your move into entrepreneurship from Google, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and sort of what the catalyst was for you to decide, like, okay, now's the time, and I really want to double down on the other passion areas.
Yeah. Happy to share my journey and thank you for having me here. Um, so I like to start off with the fact that I've lived in 5 different countries. So I spent a lot of people don't know that I spent most of my life in Asia. So 18 years in Asia. I was born in Hong Kong, 6 years there, moved to Taiwan for 8 years, moved to Shanghai for 4 years, and then moved to Canada for 7. And I only moved to the United States 3 years ago to live in New York City. And my growing up, I would say my childhood was characterized by you know often moving and having to uproot my community and sort of build a new network and new community, make new friends every couple of years. And then so I got really good at that. Got really good at I'll simplify by saying making friends, building a network, and sort of selling myself. Moved to the United States 3 years ago to work at Facebook. Convinced them to hire me, sponsor my visa, and relocate me to the city of my dreams, which still is the case. And then I switched over to Google, where I was the global product lead, also based out of New York City. I started hosting these events when I moved to city because I didn't really know anybody. It was the middle of COVID. It was August 2020. And so I came here and I was like, I literally don't know anyone. And I'm lonely. So I went online, went on Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, all these different platforms to recruit people to my dinner parties and my events. And I approached it from a very human angle. There's nothing in it for me other than just wanting to make friends and give back to the community. Did that consistently over 3 years, hosted over 100 events for 25,000 people, CEOs, tech leaders, folks similar to myself, a lot of product people too. And it's now turned to a business where I've left Google. I've built a company to sponsor my own visa, my own green card, and I quit Google last week just to pursue this full time. In terms of why I pursued that, I realized that working at these larger companies, there's really a ceiling in terms of the inputs you put in and the effort you put into the company doesn't always result in the output you want. So my efforts felt very, very much capped. And I was chasing that the aspect of freedom, which as an immigrant, your ability to stay in this country is defined by your job. And so they hold a lot of power over you. And my goal has always been to stay in this country permanently. And that whole visa thing was quite stressful. So I was like, why not just do it myself? Facebook couldn't really do it. Google wouldn't do it without a bunch of red tape. So I was like, I'm just going to figure out a way to do it myself and build a company around it. So those are the primary motivations that made me want to leave and build my own business.
Well, I certainly see a huge need for immigration reform at the government level, although with the stalemates currently going on, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So the fact that you figured out a way to navigate that through maybe investment visas and other forms of business visas for folks who are equally enthusiastic as yourself to be in the United States, that's great. We can certainly delve into that more. But before we do that, one really common theme is that sort of helping theme that sort of runs across your parties, it runs across your new business, it runs across your investing, advising, your connector hat that you wear and connecting people. So how do you allocate your time across all of that, right? Because there's a lot you could be doing with your waking hours, and obviously time is your most valuable asset, right? So how do you decide?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's changed a lot recently. When I was working at Google, half my time went to Google and the other half went to building, what is now a business. And so that was tough, balancing basically two 9 to 5 jobs. It's more so a 9 to 5, and then a 5 to 9, if you will. Today I'm still trying to figure out what the optimal way to allocate my time and energy is, but I sort of think of it as in a few different buckets. The first one is around everything digital media and content creation. So I spend a lot of my time writing my newsletter that goes out to 30,000 people. I have a lot of emails to invite people to events. That's about 4,000 people a month. And then I have a Twitter and a LinkedIn and an Instagram channel. So a lot of the social media content creation, which is about 81,000 people, it reaches about 81,000 people. So a lot of my time doing that. Another bucket is IRL events. And so there's a lot of operational work, that comes with hosting 5 events a month for a couple of thousand people. Ton of operations, but I luckily I have a team now to help me with some of that stuff. And then there's also the general business building component, which is quite new to me. Anything administrative to do with, legal, finances, that kind of thing, administrative business stuff, but also the actual business building aspect of it, which is building the brand, scaling the company, finding new revenue streams, all that kind of stuff, is a fairly new bucket for me. And the last bucket of work I'll share is this is something I've always done, and I believe it to be sort of the core of who I am and the core of my business, but I just call it helping people, and that's where I help founders raise money. I actually today I don't take a cut or a fee or any kind of carry, which a lot of people think is dumb, but in its current state, it's just literally helping founders raise money, helping them connect with reporters for press, helping them scale their teams by hiring folks for their companies. And then on the other side of things, I help job seekers, find jobs, help them with their not so much anymore, but with their resumes, with their approach. And so I have an entire bucket dedicated to helping founders, operators, and investors, which is probably the most important bucket for me.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of just that general karma, and not always necessarily having to take a piece of something, because it's a reason. There's a reason my nonprofit's called Giving Forward, because I do sort of feel like that personifies my philosophy, which seems to align with yours pretty well. So certainly in real life, events are back, right? And some of them are sort of the more traditional trade shows and conferences. And then you've got the entire party circuit, which may not be quite as business centric, except for the networking. So you started that in the middle of COVID, essentially, but I'm sure you participated pre-COVID as well in conferences and events. So how do you feel like it's changed now versus pre-COVID?
So the first thing is that people are itching to get out there. I still meet people that go to my events and are like, this is the first, they'll say that this is the first event that they've gone to in 2-3 years. So that means like throughout COVID and even post COVID for a year or two, they didn't leave their houses and at least for the purpose of networking.
Right.
And so actually what you'll see is a lot of people are quite new and a little bit awkward and still just getting back into the process of things. And surprisingly, a lot of these are executives at companies too, like VP level folks at Google and Facebook, who are like, I don't know how to do this networking thing, which is quite surprising to me. So there is a lot of demand as it relates to events. Companies, I'm noticing that a lot of companies are starting to invest their sponsorship dollars into events again, and the conference sponsorship model was once hot, and I think it'll continue to be pretty hot. But I've seen a lot of companies sort of complain on the ROI and the whole experience of sponsoring a conference and paying $30,000 for a booth. And now they're going into more niche events like mine, where you get to build a relationship with the host, with the community, and your marketing dollars go a lot further. And it feels a lot better to support sort of a small niche community or a small business. And then finally, we've seen so many reports on like the impact of loneliness and people just wanting to find their communities, especially in the Gen Z millennial age range where people just graduated from college and are looking to build their network, but they graduated at a time where it was unacceptable to leave the apartment. So people are going there for social reasons, business reasons, and just craving that community aspect, which is why in New York alone, I think you see like 10 new paid memberships, 10 new social clubs pop up every month because everybody's trying to solve the same problem, which is quite interesting. So combine all those things, people are going to events, new events are being created, and sort of this flywheel of people just getting out there and networking and building their social circle.
Yeah, what I really love about the construct that you just described is it's actually sort of akin to how people should think about media and media buying, which is it's not only about reach, it's about who the audience is and the appropriateness of that audience to who you really want to talk to. So, you can get quality at a lower quantity and still have a much higher ROI than you would just going after tonnage. It's sort of the big conference is the equivalent of the Super Bowl ad, right? It's super expensive. And can you really even handle it, right? Versus, 20 niche events where you can sort of put your focus in and know that the audience is going to be who you need to talk to. Do you feel like the same is true in the virtual event ecosystem, or do you feel like that's really more of an online only situation that sort of evolved? Do you feel like the masterminds, the webinars, the virtual meetings are similarly, primed for growth?
Yeah, I've never really done. I did my first webinar a few days ago. With we had about 1,500 people tune in on like taxes, how to optimize their taxes as an immigrant in the U.S. But I think the best combination is both IRL and URL. And so if you'll see this with companies like Hampton, where they'll the core of their product is a paid membership that is online, where they'll have weekly sort of sessions with 7 other peers that are curated to their goals and their objectives. And then occasionally once a quarter, you have like a dinner or you have like a massive retreat, somewhere in the West Coast. So those give you, so where the virtual events play a role is they're convenient and they're a lot more focused and they solve the specific problems that cause these folks to sign up in the first place. But then the IRL stuff is sort of where you build the human connection and where you sort of feel great about the experience. So I think they're very much complementary.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you've done angel investing, I've certainly at least always tried to not just be the money guy, but also be able to add value to the company from the perspective of my network or my expertise. And I wouldn't say guaranteeing the success, but improving the odds, right, that there'll be a successful outcome for the startup. I'm curious if you approached your startup investments and advisory roles in the same way.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I don't think I've invested in 4 companies. I don't think any of these companies have actually needed my money at any point. So it's never really been about the money. In some sense, it's they're giving me a favor for letting me participate in their round. I think it's more so, I get invited to be an investor in their company because they know I can help them in some aspect, or they're signaling where they believe by having my cap table, having my name on their cap table is going to be beneficial to the future of their fundraise or to the future of their company. And it's usually, I'll get involved in a company if it meets a few of the criteria. One of them is if I believe I can help with one of these dimensions, business development or sales, fundraising or product strategy. It tends to be the first two. But if I can help them in one of those dimensions, I'll get involved. The other thing is if I believe in the founder, if they seem like a brilliant person who will, win at all odds. I consider myself an underdog, having moved to this country without a big network and without access to many things. And if I see that in other people, I tend to believe them as well, especially if there's a huge delta between where they are now and where they started. And then, the last thing is I believe in the problem I've experienced the problem myself, and I think it's possibly big enough for something to be a venture scale product. So yeah, those are probably the things I tend to look for when it comes to angel investing in early stage companies.
Cool, cool. And I would imagine many of the companies that you've talked to, whether you've invested or not, have been very tech-centric and, basically building technology. And I've noticed within my incubator that the speed of development has gone up quite significantly with AI, particularly with stuff where you're doing API integrations, because who the heck wants to have to read all of the all of that documentation to figure out how to glue things together? But even just with regular code, the velocity of development has gone up significantly, and so the number of headcount that you need to accomplish the same roadmap is completely changing. I don't know if you've seen that as well, or also heard that anecdotally from the folks you talk to.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends who build sort of like no code design studios and product studios, and they've all said similar things where um, there, as a result there are more products, but also that's the result of faster product iteration cycles, and so people can get feedback and build and ship features on a much shorter scale, which is great for founders. The other thing I've noticed is on the content side. So this is more of an adjacent thing to software development, but a lot of founders will start creating content to help them fundraise or to help them go to market. And I think content has effectively been democratized, where you can now create like 50 pieces of content in 1/10 of the time that you used to be able to. You don't need agencies, or some folks need agencies, but a lot of the work streams I've seen, they've eliminated some agencies with AI, with TikTok creation, writing, LinkedIn content creation, which I think is pretty interesting. I think the overall theme is it's never been easy. It's never been easier to build a business, from the product side, from the marketing side, personal branding side, and I think all that is very empowering.
Yeah, do you feel like the larger organizations who perhaps are not as nimble will be, in a serious hurt as a result of these nimble startups coming in and being able to do more with less, and have an attractive price point?
I think a lot of the large companies will end up acquiring these small software products and bundling them up and then selling them to their existing customer base,
Hmm.
which in some sense is a win-win for all.
Right.
The smaller SaaS startups get exits. It's very hard for them to compete against like the legacy companies, legacy providers, when they don't have that network. So even the larger companies, like one example is that Google and Facebook. It's not an early stage company anymore, but we used to use Asana as our project management tool, and we were experimenting with a bunch of other stuff for scheduling, for note taking, for Zoom meetings, that kind of thing. So it's quite interesting. A lot of the larger companies have innovation arms where they're now just testing a bunch of niche products and seeing whether there's M&A opportunity there, or like general workflow opportunity for the broader team.
Right, right. So wearing your product manager hat, one of the things I struggle with, because as sort of the marketing mad scientist, I often own product within my incubator and within the stuff I'm building under Did It and under Giving Forward as well, which is, when you're in an agile or scrum type development roadmap environment and sort of feedback comes in, which indicates maybe you should layer something new in, or maybe you should sort of pivot or adjust the roadmap a little bit. I often err on the side of changing the roadmap when other people would say like, no, finish 2 more dev cycles right before you go and change something, because then you're not going to hit your first milestone, right? And so how do you go through the thought process of saying, okay, we've got new information. It's, an agile development environment. So we've learned from our customers or users or whatever. And so now we have to sort of decide, at which point do we make a change to the roadmap?
It's a really interesting point, and last couple of months I've really reconsidered my approach to product management, or to traditional product management.
Right.
I did that stuff at Google and Facebook, where these are large companies over Facebook was 80,000 employees, but Google's 180,000, and so the way we operated was um, we would build, a 3-year vision of where we thought the product should be, and then we would break that down into like long range planning, like 1 year planning, and then that goes into like quarterly planning, and then that goes into weekly sprints, and the whole thing will ladder down. And to make one tweak, especially in sort of the middle funnel of that process, would mean changing the entire strategy, because everything sort of works together.
Right.
And that came with a lot of bureaucracy, and we call it change management. I'm sure you're familiar with the term change. So most of my time was spent in change management, having to, whenever we covered a new insight, we would have to do 10x the amount of time on change management to get that through. And I always thought that was the way to do it, because that's how Facebook and Google did it. When I started working with startups, especially like pre-seed, seed startups, and this is obvious, but the iteration cycles were in days. So we got some new insight. We would immediately test the change and A/B test it on a subset of the audience.
Right.
And if the results were good, then we would roll that out to the broader product. So I think different approaches for different companies. It's been really interesting seeing how different product managers operate at different scales. And I'm not quite sure what's the right approach. It probably depends on your goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I guess when there's tech debt and more legacy code and it's not microservices based, it's much more complicated to do change management versus a smaller, newer set of code.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess it depends where you are in your journey. But it brings me back to the comment we were chatting about earlier with regards to AI speeding development. I guess one can be a little more aggressive in testing that new insight, right? If AI can get you to sort of the new MVP fork quickly, right? Where you can basically roll out that fork and say, okay, let's see, is this working better or not?
Yeah. You can. I think that's a great point. You can test new features really quickly, ship new features, and then you can also create audiences that look like your current user base that aren't, and test it on sort of a proxy audience as well.
Right. For sure. So are there any investing sectors you're particularly interested in, or is it really just to focus on your own business for the next few months as you sort of, narrow your focus?
Yeah, the investing is a passive activity. So my goal for next year is one a month, 12 investments by the end of next year. I'm sure I'm going to expand my scope of what's interesting, but so far, in terms of what I've looked at, I tend to categorize it by things I can feel and touch, things that bring people together, things that help you improve your well-being and your health, and then lastly, I talked about the underdog angle. It's anything that sort of provides underdogs with more access and more opportunity. And then this can even be software, for example, any software that helps accelerate the ability for an SMB to grow and scale. I'm interested in, but my investments so far have been more in the consumer side. Stuff I can actually use as a end user.
Right. And so what has you most excited for your own business for the next year? Is it product centric? Is it just marketing centric and doubling down on growth?
I'm most excited for the actual business building side of things. And I've never built a like a bootstrap business at this scale before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really an agency type business. It's it's not really even an events business in terms of how I'm monetizing it. So I'm interested to see where this goes and sort of have a hypothesis and see if I can prove it right or wrong. I think the thing that's most interesting to me also is scaling and being able to buy as much as my time back as possible. And I've started to do that. I've hired 2 people and a few contractors. So curious to see how that goes, because I've managed and led people, but I've never actually led people under my own organization or my own company. So I think that's all very exciting.
Great. So I'd love for you to share that sort of delegation lesson and how you arrived at that decision point on certain things that you decided, even though it'll take me 1/4 of the time to do it myself, it's better if I teach somebody else to do it it'll take a while, and maybe I have to teach them to do it twice, but after that, it's off my plate. I think a lot of managers all the way up into the C-suite struggle with that delegation challenge of, well, yeah, sure, you may be able to do it better and you may be able to do it faster, but is that the best use of your time?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely have that delegation problem now. I think if you go upper funnel, it all comes with how you hire and who you hire. And so my hiring, both the folks I hired were inbound. I wasn't even hiring at the time, but I received a bunch of cold emails. I had people coming up to me in my events saying they would do this for free, and they believed in my mission. And it took me months before I opened up the doors to them and let them get involved. So I guess my strategy is be very transparent about my values, what I'm building, and my mission, and use that to attract inbound talent, and that filters talent in the right way, I think. And then after that, I try to understand what their skills are, what energizes them, and I give them full transparency into everything I'm doing. The finances, my calendar is fully open for both the people in my team. So I now understand what they're good at. I give them full visibility into the business, and they can choose what they want to work on. I have some suggestions, but I'll let them choose what they work on, because they can sort of just run with it, and it's something they're good at. If there's something, and it has to be something they're good at as well. So that's the approach I'm taking now. We'll see if it works. So far, so good. My hope is that with every hour I buy back, I can use that to generate more revenue. I think with every full-time employee you hire, I've learned that you should aim to generate at least 100K in revenue. And I'm trying to prove that. I'm trying to prove that hypothesis. But I'm very trusting, full transparency. I give them all the budget they need, and I just trust that they will have their best intentions.
I think it's a very enlightened management style. I think a lot of people would be scared to do that. So I have to give you kudos at feeling strongly enough about the team that you're bringing on board, that you can empower them in that way. I sort of think larger bureaucratic businesses are the other end of that spectrum, where you have to get like 8 layers up from the trenches before anybody is empowered to make any decision at all, which of course exasperates customers all the time, right? Because they keep trying to take escalation paths to get stuff solved. So kudos on that. I look forward to watching your continued journey with the business, and feel free to let me know if I can help in any way.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.